Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is, of course, Michael Granado. Today, I'm going to be giving a very brief introduction and overview of Newton's philosophy of time or Newton's concept of time. Newton didn't really have a philosophy of time that comes around a little bit later. I'm going to give you a very big picture overview, introducing you to some of the central concepts to understanding how Newton viewed and thought about time and kind of how that relates to the philosophy of time today. If you want to dig a little deeper, I'm going to put some resources in the description of this video that'll give you a more thorough introduction to the philosophy of time proper, and also an introduction to kind of where Newton fits into this picture. To be clear, this is not going to be delving deep into the science of time or Newton's scientific understanding of the universe and of time, but rather how what Newton says relates to more philosophical understandings of time. And the reason why I'm doing this is, of course, Newtonian physics has been replaced in the early 20th century by Einstein's theory of relativity, but the philosophy of time is not a field that's as settled as physics. And some of these concepts, specifically A theory versus B theory of time and substantivism versus relationalism, these are still conversations that are actively happening, and kind of understanding that history and kind of understanding what Newton said about time may help you to better understand current debates and discussions related to the philosophy of time. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. And to begin with, I want to make this sort of philosophical distinction between objects versus events. Now, this is seemingly a very simple distinction, but it's going to reveal to us a little bit about the nature and the structure of time as philosophers like to talk about it. So, an object is anything, any physical thing, and objects have dimensions. They occupy space, they have spatial properties. So, an object like this microphone that I'm using, for example, has weight, it has a particular shape, it takes up a certain area of space. Objects have properties in space. An event is similar. An event is related to an object in the sense that an event involves an object. An event is something that happens to an object or something in which the object is involved in. And events can refer to anything. So if objects are related to the spatial property of a thing, then in events are related to the temporal property of a thing. So events involving object is what happens at a particular time and place, specific moments in space and time, so to speak. Each event is unique, separate from previous or future events. It's distinguishable. They are distinguishable from one another. And events can refer to anything from very significant events. So, for example, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, or it can relate to something as trivial or seemingly meaningless as me tripping over my computer charger this morning on my way to the kitchen, right? So, an event can be anything from world changing catastrophes such as 9/11 to things that have no bearing on anybody's life, such as my toothpaste still being on the counter from where I brushed my teeth this morning. The toothpaste tube, not the actual toothpaste. That would be disgusting. But hopefully you get what I'm talking about there. Now, here's the thing. The very concept of an event contains temporal properties. An event is something which occurs or happens at or in a particular time. So already we have a temporal relation occurring there. Furthermore, most events are temporary. So going back to the first thing, that an event happens at a time, you can take, since we're talking about Newtonian time, we can talk about the apple falling from a tree, an event that most likely historically did not actually happen, but it's within our mythos. So I'm going to use it as an example. The apple falling from a tree while Newton was studying, developing his theory of gravity, right? So the apple falls from the tree. That's an event. that event is temporary. It happened once. The apple that falls from the tree and lands on the ground is only going to stay in that particular place for a certain time period, for a certain span of time, because eventually that apple will dissolve or be eaten by something or someone. So the big questions here related to the philosophy of time is, what do these temporal properties tell us, these temporal properties of these objects and these events that we're talking about? What do these tell us about the nature of time itself? Or do they tell us anything about the nature of time? And we have three general questions here, and these questions, how you answer these questions, will sort of dictate your philosophy or your stance on the philosophy of time. And indeed, how Newton's going to answer these questions is going to posit his science in a particular philosophical direction that we'll kind of unpack here in a second. So first, is time an object in the same way that an apple is an object? Now we have to make some immediate distinctions here, because I've already clarified that objects have spatial properties to them. That's not necessarily what I'm saying here, but objects also have ontological properties to them. An apple exist. What do I mean when I say an apple exists? Generally speaking, most people mean that an apple exists in reality. It's a physical thing. You can, if I say that there's an apple in the next room on my kitchen counter, you could walk up to my kitchen counter, pick up that apple, eat it, feel it, taste it, smell it, all that good stuff. It has physical properties, and as a result, it has ontological property. And so when I ask the question, is time an object? What I'm asking is, does time as a thing, to use technical philosophical jargon, does time as a thing exist in the same way that that apple exists? Now, Newton's actually going to say yes, but we'll get to that here in a second. All right, so that's the first question I can ask. Is time an object? Does it have the same sort of ontological properties as other objects have, specifically existence? Second question, is time a property of objects? Now, this is slightly different from the first. In the early modern period, they like to talk about primary and secondary qualities. A primary quality of an object being the shape, size, weight of an object. A secondary quality being like the color of an object. For example, primary qualities have a more concrete ontological basis. Secondary qualities are a result of the object's perception, or the object being perceived, or me perceiving the object. I'm confusing myself here, but is time a matter of my perception? For example, is it a property of an object and not necessarily the same sort of thing as an object? Or the third question, is time a relation between objects? That is to say, does time's existence, does its ontological foundation, is its ontological foundation dependent upon the relationship between objects? Meaning that if you remove the objects, there's not necessarily much left of time itself. So this brings us back to Newton. And what exactly did Newton have to say about these things? Well, for one, Newton's not using the same sort of philosophical language, so I'm going to be doing a lot of interpretation of what Newton had to say about time. You might disagree with this. Feel free to post your disagreements in the comments section below. So Newton would say that with respect to events occur within time. Time in Newtonian physics is uniform and unchanging, and it progresses at a constant rate. I don't know why I'm doing this. I guess to convey constant, linear, progressive motion of time. Time progresses as a constant rate throughout the universe, regardless of external factors, regardless of objects. Time, as we will see, is separate and distinct from those objects. So time in Newtonian physics exists independently of events, exists independently of objects. Time is an entity. Time is a thing, and it has thing-like characteristics. It has distinctive features, and these features are separate from the events. Time provides a backdrop against which different events can be measured, a constant backdrop against which different events can be measured. So, in this sense, we say, and well, not we, Newton said that time is absolute, that it's the same in the sense that it flows or it moves or it progresses at a constant rate everywhere throughout the universe at the same rate, at the same time, at the same speed. It doesn't speed up or slow down depending upon an individual's state of motion or frame of reference or relation to a gravitational field or anything like that. It's constantly the same everywhere all at once. And there's a ontological, a metaphysical upshot to Newton's position that I'm going to attempt to demonstrate through this lovely graph chart picture illustration that I've made. I usually use this if I'm teaching this in class to try to explain it to my students. It's silly. They always laugh at my drawings because I'm a horrible artist, but I think pictorially, and this is how I kind of represent it in my head and how I'm going to try to explain it here. So time is ontologically separate and distinct from events. Time is a thing that is separate from other things such as space, objects, everything else. So in this lovely picture that I'm giving you, I think it'll be on this side. No, this side when I do the video editing. It'll be on this side, this lovely picture that I'm giving you. The E's here within the circle, the E's represent an event, a singular event, and the circle represents time as a whole, time throughout the universe, Newton's unchanging, ever flowing, ever progressing time, absolute Newtonian time. Okay, so like I said previously, one of the implications of this model is that time, because of the particular qualities that it has, which we'll talk about here in a second, can exist independently or separate from these events, these nice little E's that I have here on the screen. So I like to represent this in an equation, since Newton mostly communicated through equation. This is not as rigorously mathematical as Newton's Principia, but bear with me here for a second. So if you take, again, the circle representing absolute time, and you subtract or remove all of the events from absolute time, you're still left with time. Time is still there. And this is what will separate the metaphysical implications of Newtonian time, for example, from Einsteinian time. And it's an incredibly important distinction because under Einstein, time appears to be relational, meaning that time has certain properties that only exist between and in relation to other objects. But what Newton is saying is that even if there were no events in the universe, there would still be time, and that time would still have these particular properties. And it should be noted for Newton that you can't reverse this equation. That is to say that events cannot exist independently from time. Every event occurs within time. And of course, every event has to occur at some point, some particular point in time. Okay, so in addition to its distinct and separate existence from events, Newtonian time also exhibits the characteristic of uniformity, meaning that it flows at the same rate. There's a flow. You've probably heard this expression, the flow of time. Now, the flow of time refers to the movement or the passage of time. And we understand this phenomenologically speaking from an individual, from a subjective perspective, in the sense that the time of our lives flows or progresses in a particular direction, in the sense that I have a past that has kind of led up to this present moment, and time is moving in a particular direction in the sense that it's moving towards the future. All of us have experienced this subjectively, individually. Time has a direction, and that direction is moving towards the future. I don't know why the future is this way, but that's the Maybe it's that way. That's the way I'm pointing. And events in our lives don't all happen at the same time. They occur in a particular order. My fifth birthday, for example, happened before my 10th birthday. In the Newtonian universe, the flow of time refers to the continuous uniform progression of time from the past to the present and into the future. These temporal designations have significance. Now, whether they have ontological significance, that's up for discussion, I guess. But you can see how they would have ontological significance, although some Newtonians would be what we would consider presentist, but different discussion for a different day. This flow of time occurs at a uniform rate, meaning that each second, each minute, each hour that passes happens or passes at the same speed everywhere in the universe without any sort of variation. Again, within the Newtonian framework, time is not impacted in the same way that it will be for Einstein by the speed of light, by gravitational fields, by anything like that. It's constant throughout the universe. And because time is constant for Newton, there are some other interesting features of this model that simply aren't the case within a relativistic framework. Since Newtonian time is uniform and absolute, clocks throughout the universe can be synchronized across different locations, and events can be considered simultaneous even if they're happening in like different galaxies, theoretically speaking. So there's this question of where Newtonian time fits into the schemas that we like to use within the modern philosophy of time today. And like I said, there's some debate about that. I'm not really going to get into those details because, again, I kind of want this to be an introductory video. The major points here about Newtonian time, when we say that Newtonian time is absolute, what we mean by that is first and foremost that it is separate and distinct from events, that it exists independently of those events, and that it's the same, it's uniform, its passage is the same everywhere in the universe, regardless of those events or regardless of any other features of the universe, such as gravitational fields or such as the speed of light, that it's constant. But philosophically, one of the important distinctions that we can make based off of these basic ideas concerning Newtonian physics that I present is this distinction between a substantivist position on time and a relational position on time. So substantivism is the idea that time has basic ontological properties, that time is a substance, is a thing in the same way that other objects are things. And for Newton, those properties that I just listed are inherently fundamental to the nature and structure of time. Okay, well, I'm going to try to keep this video relatively short, so I'll stop it there. Like I said, I'll post some resources in the description of this video if you're interested. Let me know what you think about this. If you have any questions concerning the philosophy of time or Newton's position in particular, one of these days I'll make a follow-up about Einstein's theory of relativity and kind of how it fits into the general philosophy of time. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.